September 11th, 2001, is a date that lives in history. It is a day that many people will never forget. On this Tuesday morning, the world watched in shock and horror. A series of terrible attacks happened in the United States of America. These attacks were planned and carried out by terrorists. They used airplanes as weapons against important American buildings. The events of this single day caused so much sadness and changed the world in many ways. It was a clear, sunny morning that soon became one of the darkest days. The main targets of these attacks were symbols of American power and global trade. The World Trade Center in New York City, with its famous Twin Towers, was a hub of international business. The Pentagon, near Washington, D.C., is the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense. These buildings represented America's economic strength and its military might. The terrorists wanted to strike at the heart of the nation. Their actions brought devastation to these places and to the people inside them, creating scenes of chaos and disbelief that spread across the globe through television screens. The impact of the September 11th attacks was immediate and far-reaching. Thousands of innocent lives were lost in a matter of hours. Families were torn apart, and communities were left in mourning. The attacks did not just destroy buildings, they also shook the feeling of safety and security that many people had. The world felt different after that day. Governments had to think about new dangers and how to protect their people. The attacks led to big changes in how countries work together to fight terrorism. This essay will look closely at what happened on September 11, 2001. We will explore the key events of that tragic day. We will learn about the 4 airplanes that were hijacked by the terrorists. We will discuss the terrible number of people who died and the damage that was caused. We will also talk about who was responsible for these attacks. Then, we will examine the aftermath, including how the United States and the world responded. Finally, we will look at the long-term effects on health, security, and how we remember this day today. The terror began early in the morning on September 11, 2001. 19 terrorists working for a group called al-Qaeda boarded 4 different airplanes. These planes were all scheduled for long flights, meaning they had a lot of fuel. The hijackers planned to use this fuel to cause massive explosions. The first plane to be taken over was American Airlines Flight 11. It took off from Boston, heading to Los Angeles. Not long after takeoff, the hijackers took control. They turned the plane towards New York City, a bustling metropolis unprepared for the horror to come. The second plane involved was United Airlines Flight 175. This flight also left from Boston and was also going to Los Angeles. Like Flight 11, it was soon under the control of hijackers. They too changed its course and headed towards New York City. Passengers and crew on these flights faced terrifying situations. They were trapped in airplanes that had become weapons. The hijackers were cruel and determined. They used sharp objects to control the people on board and to get into the cockpit of the planes, ensuring they could pilot them to their deadly targets. The third plane was American Airlines Flight 77. This flight departed from Washington Dulles International Airport near Washington, D.C. Its destination was Los Angeles. However, it too was hijacked shortly after takeoff. The terrorists on this plane turned it around and flew it back towards the Washington, D.C. area. Their target was a very important building in the capital of the United States. The precision with which they navigated these large commercial aircraft towards specific targets showed a disturbing level of planning and training, sending a chill through security agencies worldwide. The fourth and final plane was United Airlines Flight 93. It took off from Newark, New Jersey, and was headed for San Francisco. This flight was delayed, which later became a very important factor. The hijackers on this plane also took control. However, passengers on Flight 93 learned about the attacks in New York and Washington through phone calls. They bravely decided to fight back against the terrorists. Their heroic actions prevented the plane from reaching its intended target in Washington, D.C., which was believed to be either the U.S. Capitol building or the White House. At 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time, the first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, crashed. It flew directly into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impact was high up on the building, between the 93rd and 99th floors. The crash caused a massive explosion and a huge fire. Thick black smoke poured out of the tower. People in the streets below looked up in disbelief and confusion. At first, some thought it might have been a terrible accident involving a small plane. But the size of the hole and the fire told a different story. Just 17 minutes later at 9:03 a.m., the horror intensified. United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. This plane hit the tower between the 77th and 85th floors. This second crash was seen by many more people, and it was broadcast live on television around the world. It became clear then that this was not an accident. America was under attack. The sight of two of the world's tallest buildings burning was terrifying. Panic began to spread through the city as people tried to understand what was happening. The fires in both towers were incredibly hot, fed by thousands of gallons of jet fuel. The steel structures of the buildings, though very strong, could not withstand such extreme heat for long. At 9:59 a.m., after burning for 56 minutes, the South Tower collapsed. It fell straight down, sending a giant cloud of dust and debris through the streets of Lower Manhattan. Then, at 10:28 a.m., after burning for 102 minutes, the North Tower also collapsed. The iconic Twin Towers, which had defined the New York skyline, were gone. The devastation was immense. Thousands of people were trapped in the towers above the impact zones. Many could not escape because the stairwells were blocked or destroyed. The smoke and heat were unbearable. Tragically, some people chose to jump from the high floors rather than die in the fires. The collapse of the towers also caused other nearby buildings to be badly damaged or destroyed, including 7 World Trade Center, which fell later that afternoon due to fires and structural damage. The area became known as Ground Zero, a scene of unimaginable destruction and loss. While New York City was facing catastrophe, another attack was unfolding. At 9:37 a.m. Eastern Time, American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. The Pentagon is the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense, located in Arlington, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. The plane hit the west side of the massive building. The impact caused a violent explosion and a large fire. A section of the building collapsed. This attack showed that the terrorists were targeting symbols of American military power, as well as economic power. The crash at the Pentagon caused significant damage to one of the world's largest office buildings. Brave firefighters and rescue workers rushed to the scene. They battled the intense blaze and worked to evacuate people from the damaged sections. Many people inside the Pentagon, both military personnel and civilian employees, were killed or injured. The attack on the Pentagon, so close to the nation's capital, sent a powerful message of vulnerability. It heightened the sense of crisis across the country, as it became clear these were coordinated attacks on multiple fronts. Meanwhile, the fourth hijacked plane, United Airlines Flight 93, was still in the air. Because its departure from Newark had been delayed, the passengers and crew on board learned about the other attacks through phone calls to their loved ones. They realized that their plane was also part of this terrible plot. Knowing this, a group of passengers and crew members made a courageous decision. They decided to fight back against the hijackers to try to regain control of the aircraft. They knew they were risking their lives, but they wanted to prevent more death and destruction on the ground. The struggle on Flight 93 was heroic. It is believed the passengers fought fiercely with the terrorists. Evidence from the cockpit voice recorder suggests a desperate battle took place. At 10:03 a.m., Flight 93 crashed into an empty field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It did not reach its intended target in Washington, D.C., which was likely the U.S. Capitol building or the White House. The bravery of the passengers and crew of Flight 93 saved many lives and prevented an even greater disaster in the nation's capital. They became heroes for their selfless actions on that dark day. Section 5. The human cost: lives lost and families shattered. The September 11th attacks resulted in a devastating loss of human life. In total, 2,977 innocent people were killed that day, not including the 19 hijackers. These victims came from more than 90 different countries, showing the global impact of the tragedy. In New York City, at the World Trade Center site, 2,753 people died. This number included 1,402 people in the North Tower and 614 in the South Tower. It also included hundreds of brave first responders who rushed into the burning towers to save others. 2 hotel employees in the nearby World Trade Center hotel also perished. The victims at the World Trade Center included people working in the towers, visitors, and people on the planes. Among those killed were 343 firefighters from the New York City Fire Department. There were also 23 officers from the New York City Police Department and 37 officers from the Port Authority Police Department who lost their lives. These brave men and women ran towards danger when everyone else was running away. Their sacrifice was immense and their loss was deeply felt by their colleagues, families, and the entire city. Approximately 200 individuals died after falling or jumping from the towers. At the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, 125 people were killed when American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the building. These victims were military personnel and civilian employees working at the Department of Defense. Their loss was a direct hit on the nation's military leadership and support staff. On the 4 hijacked airplanes, all 246 passengers and crew members died. This included 87 people on American Airlines Flight 11, 60 on United Airlines Flight 175, 59 on American Airlines Flight 77, and 40 on United Airlines Flight 93. Each of these individuals had a story, a family, and a future that was stolen. Beyond the deaths, over 6,000 other people were injured in the attacks. Many suffered burns, smoke inhalation, and injuries from falling debris. The emotional and psychological toll was also enormous, affecting survivors, witnesses, and people across the country and the world. While about 16,000 people managed to evacuate the World Trade Center complex before the towers collapsed, only 18 individuals were pulled alive from the rubble afterwards. The scale of the human tragedy was difficult to comprehend, and the process of identifying victims took many months and even years for some families. Section 6. The masterminds al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. The horrific attacks on September 11, 2001, were not random acts of violence. They were carefully planned and executed by a terrorist group called al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, which means the base in Arabic, was an international Islamist extremist organization. It was founded in the late 1980s by Osama bin Laden and others. Their goal was to fight against what they saw as Western influence in Muslim countries and to establish a global Islamic state or caliphate. They considered the United States and its allies to be their main enemies. Osama bin Laden was the leader and public face of al-Qaeda. He came from a wealthy family in Saudi Arabia. In the 1980s, he helped fund and fight with Mujahideen forces against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. After the Soviets left, he turned his attention to the United States. He was angry about U.S. support for Israel, the presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, near Islam's holiest sites, and U.S. policies in the Middle East. Bin Laden issued fatwas, or religious rulings, calling for attacks against Americans, both military and civilian, around the world. The 19 hijackers who carried out the 9/11 attacks were loyal followers of al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. Most of them, 15 in total, were from Saudi Arabia. Others came from the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Lebanon. They had trained for their mission for months, some even for years. Some of the hijackers had received flight training in the United States, learning how to pilot large commercial airplanes. They were organized into teams, with a trained pilot in each group, to take control of the aircraft and fly them into their designated targets. Al-Qaeda had carried out other attacks against U.S. interests before 9/11. These included the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, the 1998 bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, and the 2000 attack on the USS Cole in Yemen. The 9/11 attacks were by far their most ambitious and devastating operation. Osama bin Laden initially denied responsibility but later admitted al-Qaeda's role. He saw the attacks as a major victory against the United States and hoped it would inspire more Muslims to join his cause against the West. Section 7. A Nation's Response. The War on Terror begins. The attacks of September 11th shocked and angered the United States. The immediate response was one of rescue and recovery, but very quickly the focus shifted to finding out who was responsible and how to respond. President George W. Bush declared that the U.S. would make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. This set the stage for a new kind of global conflict, the War on Terror. This war would not be against a single country, but against terrorist networks around the world. One of the first major actions in the War on Terror was the invasion of Afghanistan in October 2001. Al-Qaeda, under Osama bin Laden, was based in Afghanistan. They were protected by the Taliban, an Islamist group that ruled most of the country. The U.S. and its allies launched military operations to remove the Taliban from power and to destroy al-Qaeda's training camps. The goal was to capture or kill Osama bin Laden and dismantle his organization. This marked the beginning of a long and difficult conflict in Afghanistan. Back in the United States, the government made significant changes to protect the country from future attacks. One of the biggest changes was the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, in 2002. This new department brought together many different government agencies to coordinate efforts against terrorism. Its responsibilities included border security, emergency preparedness, and protecting critical infrastructure. The Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, was dissolved, and its functions were split among new agencies under DHS, such as Customs and Border Protection, CBP, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Another important piece of legislation passed after 9/11 was the USA Patriot Act. This law gave law enforcement agencies new powers to gather intelligence and investigate suspected terrorists. It allowed for increased surveillance, such as monitoring phone calls and emails, with the aim of preventing future attacks. While these measures were intended to improve security, they also led to debates about civil liberties and privacy. People worried about the government having too much power, and whether these new laws went too far in restricting personal freedoms in the name of national security. Section 8. Living with the Scars: Long-Term Health and Security Changes. The impact of September 11th extended far beyond the day of the attacks. Many people who survived, especially first responders and those living or working near Ground Zero, suffered serious long-term health problems. When the Twin Towers collapsed, a massive cloud of toxic dust covered lower Manhattan. This dust contained asbestos, lead, glass fibers, jet fuel residue, and many other harmful substances. Breathing in this dust caused severe respiratory illnesses, cancers, and other health issues for thousands of people. Many are still suffering today. The World Trade Center Health Program was established to provide medical monitoring and treatment for responders, recovery workers, volunteers, and survivors exposed to the 9/11's toxins. As of recent reports, this program monitors over 111,000 individuals. Sadly, more than 4,000 people have died from 9/11-related illnesses since the attacks. Experts believe that the number of deaths from these illnesses will eventually be higher than the number of people killed on the day of the attacks. The mental health impact has also been significant, with many first responders and survivors experiencing PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Beyond health concerns, 9/11's led to permanent changes in security policies, especially for air travel. Airport security became much stricter. Passengers now face more thorough screening processes. This includes removing shoes, limiting liquids in carry-on bags, and passing through advanced imaging technology scanners. Cockpit doors on airplanes were reinforced to prevent unauthorized entry. Air marshals, who are armed law enforcement officers, began flying on more flights. These measures were designed to make it much harder for terrorists to hijack planes again. The attacks also led to ongoing debates about the balance between security and civil liberties. The increased surveillance powers given to government agencies raised concerns about privacy. There were discussions about how to fight terrorism effectively while still protecting the rights of individuals. The war on terror led to long-term military engagements in Afghanistan and Iraq, and operations against terrorist groups in other parts of the world. These conflicts have had a profound impact on global politics and on the lives of soldiers and civilians in those regions, shaping international relations for decades. Section 9. Remembering 9/11's, Memorials and Honoring the Heroes. Years after the attacks, it is very important to remember what happened on September 11, 2001. It is important to honor the victims who lost their lives and the heroes who showed great courage. Around the United States, and especially at the sites of the attacks, memorials have been built. These memorials provide places for people to reflect, to grieve, and to remember. They serve as a permanent reminder of the tragedy and the human spirit that endured it. They also educate future generations about the events of that day. The most prominent memorial is the National September 11 Memorial and Museum in New York City. It is located at the site where the Twin Towers once stood. The memorial features two large reflecting pools. These pools are in the exact footprints of the North and South Towers. The names of all 2,977 victims killed in the 9/11's attacks, as well as the 6 victims of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, are engraved on bronze panels surrounding the pools. The nearby museum tells the story of 9/11 through artifacts, personal accounts, and multimedia displays. In Arlington, Virginia, the Pentagon Memorial honors the 184 people who died there. The memorial consists of 184 illuminated benches, one for each victim, arranged according to their age. Each bench is positioned over a flowing pool of water. Near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the Flight 93 National Memorial remembers the brave passengers and crew of United Airlines Flight 93. The memorial includes a wall of names, a visitor center, and a tower of voices with 40 wind chimes, representing the 40 heroes who fought back against the hijackers. Every year on September 11th, ceremonies are held at these memorials and in communities across the country. People gather to read the names of the victims, to lay flowers, and to observe moments of silence. These acts of remembrance help to ensure that those who are lost are never forgotten. They also honor the bravery of the first responders, the resilience of the survivors, and the unity that was shown in the face of such terrible adversity. Remembering 9/11 helps us to learn from the past and to work towards a more peaceful future